Welcome back to AM Northwest. Our next guest says each of us has certain foods our digestion can't handle. And these food intolerances can lead to chronic disease if we don't take action. Here to share more, we welcome back the author of The Serpent and the Butterfly, The 7 Laws of Healing, naturopathic Dr. Ben Reebs. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Helen.
I understand that food testing and food intolerance testing is like one of the biggest things you do in your practice.
It is. I think it's perhaps the single most important thing that we can figure out because our foods can be our kryptonite, and they can not only be root causes of chronic disease, but they can also lead to profound symptoms such as diarrhea, constipation, weight gain, fatigue, congestion. And if we can identify the 1 or 2 foods that our bodies can't break down, then we can get that much closer to not having those symptoms.
I didn't know that food intolerance could lead to disease. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, so recently I had a 27-year-old female, and we identified a gluten intolerance in her. And she had some pretty severe bloating that she had her whole life. And within about 3 weeks, just after removing gluten and taking a little bit of digestive enzymes, her bloating completely went away, and she also, her energy went up significantly.
But what would be the disease that it would lead to?
Yeah, so the bloating had been with her whole life, and she'd had a picture of irritable bowel syndrome that she'd been diagnosed with previously. And so that is now completely resolved.
Okay, so when it comes to food intolerance, can we have a food intolerance and not know it?
Absolutely, and I believe everyone does. There are many ways to test this, though, and evaluate. And so every naturopathic physician has a different test or evaluation they do.
Okay, so you need a blood test, right, to test your food intolerance?
Correct. Yes. A blood test is the #1 way. Usually you draw a tube of blood or you do a blood spot.
Okay, so what are the most common food allergies? We mentioned gluten, which seems to be more and more. And is it helpful to remove gluten in general, you think?
I don't recommend it for everyone. I know some doctors do. It is one of the only known foods to cause something called intestinal permeability, where we have leaky gut. And so there is science that's in for that.
Okay, so give us some of the other foods that we might be intolerant to and not even know it.
Right. So I'd say the top ones are egg, gluten, dairy. We do see potato fairly commonly. Grains can also be an issue, but I'd say that egg and gluten and dairy and potato are probably the top ones that I see in my practice.
What do you see when someone's intolerant to dairy?
Yeah, so dairy, it's a little different for everyone, but the #1 thing I see is irritable bowel, so constipation or diarrhea, and the #2 thing I see is congestion. So congestion that leads to seasonal allergies, kind of having just upper respiratory congestion.
Okay, and then the other one was egg that you mentioned, and I really am surprised about the egg allergy. I hadn't heard of that. What have you noticed when it comes to patients and egg allergies?
Yeah, so with egg, it's also a little bit different for everyone. And usually it'll be digestive complaints. Sometimes we see rashes. Oftentimes we see congestion, fatigue, and also autoimmune disease can result. So egg is a fairly common one, and it's a little different in everyone.
Once you found the intolerance then and people are avoiding that food, have you noticed a big change in how they feel and how their body is?
Absolutely. Usually within 2 or 3 weeks, they notice those symptoms improve. They feel their energy's a little bit up, their sleep improves, their skin clears. They often lose a few pounds because the inflammation, it causes more water to be retained in the body. So they usually lose 4, 5, 6 pounds overnight practically.
Oh, wow.
And we see the most remarkable results with food intolerance, food sensitivity.
Have you ever heard of someone being intolerant to tomatoes?
Yes, and that is one we see. Those are nightshades, and we see that fairly commonly, but not as common as egg, dairy, gluten. Cane sugar is another big one.
What?
Cane sugar, yeah. Cane sugar is another one we see very often. And I'm not one of those doctors that just takes people off of things just because.
Right.
We really do the testing, do the evaluation, and see if it's right for the patient.
And is it's as simple as a blood test?
It's as simple as a blood test. You get back a report, and then the person can begin implementing it. And, you know, it's baby steps. It's not something that one can do right overnight.
Right, because sometimes it seems like there's a lot you have to take out of your diet.
Yes, and sometimes just lowering it, 20, 30, 40% can also have big improvements. So if a person loves dairy more than anything and they don't want to give it up, but they have a dairy intolerance, just by eating less dairy, they feel better.
Oh, that's great. These are all good information. Thank you so much. We want to mention to everyone, the book again is titled The Serpent and the Butterfly, The 7 Laws of Healing. Dr. Ben Reebs, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Helen.